Well, hello, everyone. I'm Holly Tate. I'm Vice President of Business Development here at Vanderbloemen, and we are thrilled that you chose to spend this hour with us to learn about what the future of institutional advancement looks like. And we have brought together esteemed thought leaders on this topic. We've handpicked each of them for their specific influence that they have and their perspectives in Christian higher education. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Brian Jensen, in just a minute to moderate today's panel. But I wanted to introduce you to your Zoom panel. So at the bottom, there is a Q&A box. And we would invite you, as you are listening today, or if you have questions, we would invite you to put that there in the Q&A panel. I'll be able to see those, and we will get to those before we wrap up today. There's also a chat panel, and so I would love to hear where you're joining us from today. If you'll just put that there in the Zoom webinar chat panel, we would love to hear where you're joining us from. Our panel is even all across the country, and we know that you who are joining us are all across the country as well, and so we would love to meet you today and hear where you're joining us from. So Brian Jensen is one of our executive search consultants here at Vanderbloemen, and he focuses on higher education and secondary education as he serves our clients as well as nonprofits. So Brian, I will turn it over to you and turn my video off so you can share your story and moderate today's panel.
Thank you, Holly, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. It's good to be with you. Like Holly said, I joined the Vanderbloemen team after 15 years in Christian higher education. I started at North Central University in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I cut my teeth in student affairs work and quickly fell in love with it, and then ended up at Geneva College in beautiful Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, and was there for over a decade and ended my time there. As the last few years, I was the Vice President of Student Development. Loved my time there, and now I love the work I get to do serving Christian institutions across the country as we help them navigate staffing challenges and hiring decisions, and really helping them navigate whatever they might be facing. And recently, we've been helping them navigate some unprecedented times, and we've been having a lot of conversations. And I'm very thankful that I've been able to have those conversations. As one, we just continue to rest in the promises of the scriptures and know that God is on the throne. But we have a lot of work to do, and we pray for wisdom and discernment as we continue to lead as best we can in our institutions. One of the conversations that we've been hearing a lot about recently is, what does advancement work look like? What does donor development work look like now in the midst of this kind of crisis moment? But also now, as we're pivoting a little bit, what does it look like as we move forward? As we start to think summer months, fall months, and really into the future, the indefinite future of what things might be looking like as we change. And so I'm really excited about the friends that I have with me today to have this conversation. I mentioned as we got going, before we started recording, that I'm the facilitator here, and they are on the front lines of advancement work right now. And so I'm excited to hear from them. And one of the things we've been talking about in all of these types of conversations we're having is, none of us really took a grad class in navigating a global pandemic. And so we're learning together through this. And so I hope that what you hear today is helpful. And please, as you ask questions, we want to learn from you as well. So we're all in this learning together. I'm going to start by letting each of my friends introduce themselves, and then we're going to kick into some questions here. So I'm going to let Britt Carlson start by introducing herself.
So hello, everyone. My name is Britt Carlson-Eaton. I serve as the Associate Vice President for Advancement at Gordon College. Also in this season, leading our comprehensive capital campaign, the Faith Rising campaign, which has a goal of $130 million raised, and we are in the home stretch of that. So that's a little bit about my background.
Wonderful. Kimberly?
Hello, I am Kimberly Thornbury, and I'm the Senior Program Director at the Murdoch Trust. I began here in September after 26 years in higher education, most recently from the King's College in New York City. And the Murdoch Trust is a foundation. We just celebrated giving away $1 billion this summer. We give away about $60 million to nonprofits in the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you. And Mark, why don't you introduce yourself and your work? And I think Holly wants to say something before you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Brian. I completely forgot in my jitters of starting the webinar to talk about how this is a partner webinar with our friends at Generis. Vanderbloemen and Generis have been friends for many, many years. Jim Shepard, one of the principals, and Brad Leeper have been a gift to William Vanderbloemen, our founder, as he started Vanderbloemen 10 years ago. And so we have a lot of client overlap with Generis, which is one of the reasons why we partnered on this webinar, because Mark leads the Total Advancement Solutions team at Generis, where he serves education institutions from higher ed to secondary, as well as nonprofits. So Mark, we're so grateful for you and the Generis team. And now I will let you share more and go away again, but I'm so sorry for forgetting that at the top of the webinar.
Not a problem, Holly. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be with you today. I do work at Generis, but let me tell you how I got to Generis. By God's providence, I've been involved in fundraising for virtually all my career. I started at the seminary level. I'm actually a graduate of a Christian college, Bethel University, and then attended Trinity Divinity School in Deerfield. Came on the staff there to do a capital campaign. It wasn't quite $130 million, Britt, back then, but it was a stretch even for us. And that's how I cut my teeth in fundraising. Was asked to join Wheaton College as their vice president for advancement. And I couldn't have imagined I would have been there as long as I was, but I was there for 19 years, leading the team there. And that's where I really, I think, gained depth in working with a very high-powered board and working with some very fine men and women who love the Lord and love to give. About 5 years ago, I was doing some work for Generis, that is doing a conference for their church fundraising team. And at that time, the two principals, one has been mentioned already, Jim Shepard, called me aside and said, you know, we've always wanted to be in the Christian higher education, K through 12 and ministry space, but we wanted somebody to lead that. And they asked if I would come and do that. And about that time in my career, I realized I'd been responsible for a gift income goal each of the last 30 years. And so it felt kind of good to help other people get to their gift income goals. So that's what we've been doing. There's a team of 8 of us at Generis that work with seminaries, Christian colleges and universities all around the country, as well as in the K through 12 and Christian ministry space. So that's been our work for the last 5 years. I will tell you, I tell people pretty freely, I don't love everything about consulting, but I want to tell you what I do love about consulting. You get to touch on a lot of different ministries. When you're at one place for a long time, you kind of think you're the center of the universe. And you find out when you're consulting, there are a lot of amazing people doing amazing work all around the country. And that's a pleasure. And that's why it's a pleasure to interact with some of you today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mark. And good word. I would say the same thing. It's fascinating to get to rub shoulders with people across the country as they're doing kingdom work together, and however we can come alongside and do that, we're excited to. And today is one of those ways. So I want to jump right in, and I've told Mark and Kimberly I'm going to let them lead off by describing. I'm going to let Mark go first, and then Kimberly can jump in. Basically, just describe what you're seeing right now as this is unfolded over the last, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks. And as we head into the summer months, describe the landscape of philanthropy just in general right now.
Yeah, I would start by putting it in the context of the last earthquake we had, 2008, 2009. That changed philanthropy, I think, in many significant ways. But the COVID-19 is a different kind of earthquake. In 2008, 2009, it was our highest capacity people that were hit the hardest. This one has hit the less affluent much harder. Just read the other day in the journal that of people that make $50,000 and less, 39% are unemployed. today, which is a staggering figure. And those are populated by people that love us and give to our ministries. Here's just a few of the things that we're seeing. Major givers are kind of reluctant right now to think about long-term commitments. There was a day when we did campaigns way back. I never did a 10-year campaign, but some of the big universities did 10-year campaigns. I think 2008, 2009 shortened that to 5 years tops. And right now, I'm just not seeing an appetite for people to say, I know what my income is going to be 3 years from now, 5 years from now. So I think that's going to change the way we think about campaigns going forward, for example. I think our mid-level givers are kind of shell-shocked right now. They don't love us any less than they did before, but I think there is a sense of not knowing what their future is going to be. And in higher education and nonprofits in general, the Chronicle of Philanthropy did a survey recently. 73% of those that they surveyed anticipated a decline in giving next year. 50% of that group thought it would be 20% or more. So that's the environment that we're facing. It makes us in higher education think about what our fundraising goals should be. We always want to stretch ourselves, but we also need to be sensitive to the moment. So those are some of the things that we're seeing. I'd love to hear from your perspective, Kimberly, what you're seeing.
Well, thank you. I know in the foundation world, we have seen some foundations close their doors like 2008 and pause for a little bit. But I thought I would maybe mention two positive things I'm seeing in the landscape, creativity and some consistency. I have seen a lot of creativity in philanthropy right now. I have seen some virtual formats, a lot of spring galas move online and exceed goals, meet goals in surprising ways when I talk to some of the nonprofit leaders. Creativities of getting people in virtual dinner tables so they're not talked at as much as they have been these past 2 months. Working with a camp who sent their key donors a mini campfire. So they sent a tea light and a toothpick and a mini marshmallow and a chocolate chip that arrived to their door before their meeting for some of their select donors. And that was kind of fun in terms of creative ways they're connecting with their donors. And I have seen some consistency. One thing I've learned early on is that there are generous people and there are stingy people. And generous people continue to find ways to give, often sacrificially. Stingy people, you're not going to change their mind, no matter how amazing your case statement is and how much data you continue to provide them. But I have found the people who do have the capacity to give, really trying to step up to the plate as they are able to. So those are positive things I'm seeing.
Yes, I love the positivity shared as well. Yes, we know it's a sobering time right now, but we also want to spread some hope too through this. So anytime those stories pop into your mind of what you're seeing being done creatively, please chime in. Mark, I want to toss it back to you and just it's a similar question, but it's more donor centric. So what are you hearing as far as what's on top of mind for donors right now?
Well, first of all, our givers are human like we are, and they're looking at the landscape and saying, what is my financial future going to look like? So they're making that calculation even as they continue to relate with us. I would say a theme that I see is consolidation and prioritization of giving. We actually saw this back in 2008, 2009, where givers had to make the decision, okay, maybe I've been giving to 10 or 13 different entities. Where can I concentrate my giving and make the most good? And I think I'm seeing that now as well. What's the lesson for us in higher education? We need to be in touch with them. They need to know that the mission that we serve and the students that we serve and their potential for influencing culture has never been more important. And we want to be in line as these givers consider, okay, where can my gift make the biggest difference? I think we may face, we haven't seen it a lot at this point, but we've seen it in the past in economic turmoil. Am I going to be able to fulfill the pledges that I've made? The good news here is, as Kimberly said, true givers are always true givers, and they will do the best that they can. It's great to be having conversations, particularly with those who have large, longer-term commitments to us, and just find out how they're doing, how they're feeling about it. I remember 10 years ago, we were in a campaign and we had just a small handful of our givers who said, I'm not going to be able to fulfill in the time frame that I said. We didn't have one that didn't fulfill their commitment, but some extended their giving by another year just to make it happen. So I think those are some of the things that are in the minds of givers. We've seen an uptick in giving to frontline COVID-19 folks, which makes all the sense in the world. So these crises tend to make people think pretty seriously about what's important in their life. That's why I think, for example, we've seen an uptick in planned giving. I'm guessing a number of firms have seen that. A number of higher education entities have seen it as well. And I think part of it is you kind of think about your mortality a little bit. I think you also have a little bit more time to do things that you've been putting aside. So it's planned giving is an opportunity as well. And I think that's top of mind for some people that have been contemplating it but haven't pulled the trigger.
Yeah, good. Britt, do you have anything to add, being somebody that's in an institution right now, hearing from your donors during this time?
Sure. I think I'm experiencing and hearing a lot of what Mark's talking about in terms of donors certainly are still wanting to be in relationship with us. They want to hear what's happening. Their interest in the institution and our students remains the same. And I think particularly really seeing an interest in helping our students who are made most vulnerable by what's happening. So we, for example, did an online giving day recently, and typically those have a much more festive atmosphere to us. They're more of a party. We pivoted and decided, you know what, this really needs to be about showcasing our students and what's happening in their experience right now, and had really a tremendous response. We had a response that engaged both our alumni population, our regular donor population, as well as our faculty and staff. So it just was a tremendous outpouring. We achieved double our goal on that day. So just, you know, people are still wanting to hear what's happening, and really, I think, particularly wanting to help the students that are made most vulnerable, and wanting to see the institutions continue. They understand that there's an impact for our institutions as well. So they continue to have a heart and want to be a part of the story.
Yeah. I'm going to throw a curveball really quick. Mark, do you see other institutions, you know, of course, everybody started the calendar year of 2020 with a specific strategic giving plan. Obviously, things have been thrown off a little bit. Have you seen some campaigns put on hold or shifts to, hey, COVID relief funds for our students, for our facilities? I mean, what are you seeing kind of frontline giving wise? Yeah.
We've been working with a few that we were in the feasibility stage of a campaign, and that is definitely on hold. We've got two schools that we worked with that we had half the feasibility study done, but the second half of it's going to look a lot different when we do it probably late this fall. So we're definitely seeing that. As far as halting campaigns, no. I think it's a time that calls for empathy and a lot of communication with people that are involved in a campaign. But we don't see anybody that is of a mind to say, well, that's it for this campaign. We need to put this on the shelf. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's a pause where we need to be very very aware of the struggles that some of our givers are facing and the uncertainty that they're facing. But it's also a time to say that we're going to be here through this campaign and on the other side of this campaign. So maybe a slowdown, but I haven't seen anybody abandon the campaign at this point.
Okay, yeah. We are going to talk about communication because I know that's so key right now, and we're going to come back to Britt to lead us off with that. Before I do, I wanted to toss one to Kimberly. Some institutions, now some people sitting in their chairs right now leading donor development work at their institution might be thinking, hey, we're even a little bit hesitant right now making asks during this time, or even sharing our needs right now, because we know everybody's struggling through this, and we just feel a little guilty about that. What encouragement do you have for those that sit in that seat, and why is it still appropriate and important to be open and honest about needs and make asks right now?
Sure. Well, at Murdoch, we want to give to institutions that are going to succeed with our dollars. And part of what we do is a lot of training in leadership, board development, and fundraising, because those components help make strong institutions. So you've probably all heard the basics, you know, don't start with your need when you're talking to the donor, ask about them, check in on them. And it was interesting to hear Mark about the legacy campaigns. You know, I think we can do that now. At first, you know, we didn't recommend starting with the estate planning so soon, but now it is top of mind. But you have to get to the basics of your development work. There is no silver bullet. And maybe you have more time now because you're not traveling. And what are those basics? Do you have an awesome and compelling case statement? Have you refreshed it? Is it exactly what it needs to be? 2, have you refreshed your segmented donor list, your tiers? You know, everyone who's maybe new to advancement thinks, oh, if only everyone would give $100, we would be all set. Well, we know in development, it doesn't work that way. And are your responses working for your tiered donors? Do you have a great annual plan? Does it need to be refreshed? You have time to work on that, and you have time to work on a great communication and synergy with your development team, which should include board members. And I'll tell you what donors are looking at, or at least for foundations. Is your board continuing to show up? Is your board giving 100% both to the institution and to the project? Do you have mandated cash reserves? Have you been in pretty good health, and what are those cash reserves kicking in? Do you have a clear story on your unrestricted net assets? I cannot emphasize using this time well for board training and development. And if I have time for a quick story, when I left being a VP, senior VP at Union University, I asked my mentor, the president, what was the #1 thing that you're proud of? Was it growing the institution from 1,300 to 5,500? Was it surviving the 2008 crisis? Was it surviving the worst natural disaster in higher ed history when a tornado devastated our campus? Was it growing majors? Was it being international? What was it? And his answer at the time to me was anticlimactic. He said, board recruitment, training, and development. And only years later did I realize how key that was and how key that is for your development team. And so during this time, I think the development work is, do you have great job descriptions for your board? Do you have a great onboarding process? How do you recruit? How do you honor your board members? Do you have clear committees? Do you have great dashboards? Do you have great data? Do you have a great board education plan? And as you work on an awesome board, you mentioned earlier, the executive director and the VP or development are not coming in with the Rolodex. It is cultivating that board to help you continue to tell your case statement well. And so what I'm saying is if you're traveling less, work on that, but do not be afraid to continue to ask. I know at Murdoch, we are open for business. Our doors are open. We're ready to hear the compelling stories, but we want to give to institutions that have strong boards and a strong plan.
Yeah, it's a good word. And before we shift to communication, Britt or Mark, do you have things to add? I think board, the whole arena of board involvement, boards helping navigate through this crisis is really important. Specific to advancement work, what are you seeing healthy boards do right now?
For one thing, boards rally with their giving. We've seen in several of our clients that some very significant gifts have come in because of the shortfall that we're seeing in higher education. So giving is really important. Informal meetings of the board, I should say, that aren't regularly scheduled meetings are happening on a regular basis. That tells me that a president is relating well with his board. I wanted to just say something Kimberly touched on. We've got to keep giving. And I think the tendency in this environment is, I can't be in their living room and have the conversation that I wanted to have. But I just want to encourage those of you that are listening today, and I know many of you are doing this, our givers are very understanding. We can call them and say, I really wanted to have this conversation in your living room, and I'm sorry we can't. But this is something that we've talked about in the past and is really important to the university. Would you mind having that conversation right now or soon? And we find people very responsive to that. So I just want to affirm what Kimberly said. We can't go into hibernation in our solicitation.
Britt, anything to add before we jump in?
Yeah, I couldn't concur more. We are finding our donors continue to want to engage. We're doing meetings like this. We're on Zoom, so we get to continue to sit across the virtual table with our donors. Phone calls, emails. We're finding that people are still very actively wanting to engage with us. It's the relational capital and work that's gone before this that is, I think, allowing the mode to change, but still allow for really effective connection and opportunities to share opportunity, and people are responding to that.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good segue, because one of the things I want to talk about is communication. It's essential and maybe more crucial than ever. And most people listening, and I don't think anybody around this circle would say there's just, magical tips and tricks, but I do want to provide maybe some practical advice. So what, Britt, I'm going to toss this your way first. What communication practices, method, timing, content are you considering right now? What should we be thinking about as we're in this time, and what's working really well?
Yeah, so we made a couple of decisions early on with our team that I think have really helped, and I would say they're still relevant even where we find ourselves today. First, we decided not to be silent. We decided relationship continues to be key, and we wanted to be really proactive and present with those that we've been gifted relationship with for this season. So our team has been really intentional about continued connection. And we decided from the beginning that we would really think about a message of care and more pastoral in nature in terms of initial outreach, particularly as the pandemic really came into the scope that we understood it to be, really wanting to make those outreaches really focused on care. We were regularly wanting to point people to Jesus, remind them that our God is a faithful God. So really making scripture and really asking if there are ways that we could come alongside effectively to pray, to help in the moment. And I think that early decision to be really present and to be proactive has allowed us to be in ongoing relationship, ongoing communication. So we've done that through email, through text, through Zoom, through phone call, and really been intentional at trying to touch every single member of our pool in some way, shape, or form. And the more personal, the better. It's been our MO in this stage. And really trying to be sensitive to when when will be the right time to walk toward an ask. And we found that really, as we have entered into this next phase of the pandemic experience, where there is this gradual reopening that's happening, we do sense that there's a turning of the corner that's happening. But I do think it's that work that we've done to continue to be in authentic and real relationship that has allowed us to know when it's time to walk forward with that solicitation and with that ask. So that's what we're experiencing. But again, just needing to pivot on some things, to be open to having the virtual visit, to meet across the virtual table through Zoom. We also are finding that we've hosted some different virtual gatherings. I think Kimberly mentioned some different really creative solutions people have been doing for both events or other types of gatherings they would have had in this season. So we've hosted a number of different town halls or state of the college events for our different constituents, really creating space for Q&A so we can keep people abreast of what's happening. So they feel like they're with us as we walk through this. So we found that has been really helpful as well.
I'm going to share another cool thing that Britt and her team did with their alumni. With the whole staff being virtual, there were some that couldn't do all of their job virtually, so they had extra time. So they organized for, I think, about 40 of the staff members to agree to write 200 notes to alumni, handwritten notes to alumni. If you do the math on that, that's 8,000 alumni of Gordon College who have received a handwritten, hey, we love you, we care about you, and thank you for your prayers and care for us. That wouldn't have happened in any other environment but this environment. And God willing, that group of people are going to say, hey, we had a little bit to do with fundraising here. Advancement isn't just a department, it's something that we're all responsible for.
Yeah, that's a fabulous idea. Britt, did you, just out of curiosity, did you come up with a pretty solid general communication plan, or did you segment based on tier giver or age demographic or anything like that?
Yeah, so we've been looking at groups a little bit differently. So we've got a really defined major gift group, a defined rising donor group. We've thought about our alumni community, and really made a communication approach for each of those segments within each. There was some commonality in terms of just general approach, really that idea of being pastoral, really wanting to say, how can we be present with you? So how can we be praying for you? One of the things we did very early on was we created a link where people could submit prayer requests. So we could be praying actively with our donors, praying for them and with them. And we saw tremendous response from that. And it's been something we've been able to do on an ongoing basis. And then it gives us an opportunity to circle back and say, we've been praying for you. And it just has created a lot of open doors for us for continued communication and connection. But yes, we have looked at it kind of in 3 to 4 different segments and really created a specific plan for each that had all of the key elements we felt were important in this particular season. We've, pivoted and tweaked along the way as we've learned from some of the experiences that we've had, what seems to be landing, what maybe isn't landing. But for the most part, pretty quickly knew we were going to need to have a different spring than we thought we were going to have, and modified our plans accordingly.
Yeah, that's good. Britt, I want to shift and start thinking forward now. So what should, I think a lot of people are now thinking, what should the next 6, 8, 10 weeks look like? What do you think institutions, maybe what is Gordon thinking about, what do institutions need to think about when we consider post-summer planning? A lot of in-person gatherings obviously canceled this spring and we pivoted quickly and got creative. What's planning looking like now for some of the fall galas, big kickoff events, campaign, anything like that, but in-person gatherings, what's planning looking like for you?
Yeah, so one of my responsibilities is chairing the planning for a joint event we're hoping to host in October, which is our traditional homecoming weekend, but we're also adding our commencement festivities to that as well. So we continue to move forward in faith that we may be able to do that in person, but to be really transparent, we are planning two events in parallel. So we are planning for needing to be fully remote for that weekend. And we are planning for really how to provide a hybrid experience. So we know that there will likely, if we are given the green light from the state and federal guidelines to say we could move toward an in-person experience, even in small groups, how would we facilitate that? And we know that there will be some people who will be anxious to come to campus and take part in that in person, but then we will have other people who, for a variety of reasons, whether it be travel restrictions or because they're a part of a population that is higher risk, will not be able to join us. So really thinking about how do we provide a hybrid experience that provides an excellent experience for those who are not going to be able to be physically present with us, even if part of the event is happening in person. So really we're running any event that we have on the horizon with really two things in parallel to provide flexibility, but always with a robust remote option in mind.
Good. Mark and Kimberly, are you seeing other ideas happen or just things floating out there as people think about planning for fall in-person gatherings?
Kimberly made mention of this, but I think we all need to seize the opportunity we have to do more planning than we normally would. And I think some organizations are rethinking now that they can't do a golf outing or a gala. Should we be investing as much time and money in those kinds of events in the future as we have in the past? I think that answer for some organizations is no, that we shouldn't. I think planning on how not just to ask givers, but how to engage givers. The best shops, as you all know, are the ones that find ways to not just ask for people's financial support, but to engage them as prayer warriors, as counselors. And if we're more intentional about planning to do that, our fundraising is going to be a lot more successful. And I think we have the space now to rethink how we're utilizing our budget resources and our personnel resources in advancement. It's a great time to take stock. What are the good things that maybe we should leave behind so that we can concentrate on the better things, the ones that will help us be most successful. So let's take advantage of some of the extra contemplative time that we have to make our shops better.
Yeah, that's good. Anything to add, Kimberly?
No, just a shout out to all the groups that are doing dual planning. I know we are, and it's a lot of work to do too. Comprehensive, major dual planning. And I see you and I hear you, and you're doing a great job, and it's hard.
Yeah, it's a good word. Mark, I want to toss it back your way and ask you this. We've had to pivot quickly. We've had to get very creative. And we know things are not just going to magically go back to whatever sense of normalcy will look like anytime soon. So you just mentioned, and Kimberly's mentioned, with the time we have now, additional planning, very important. What sort of new and innovative approaches to advancement work, just kind of in general across the board, are you seeing or do you think we should be considering as we move into this new reality?
I don't think any of us have it figured out at this point. I think we need to be better at our individual visits with givers, because I don't think we're going to have as many opportunities to have small or large events out there, which is usually the bread and butter of advancement. And we may not have that back for a couple of years, and we may figure out there's a better way of doing it than the expense of those kinds of events. So I think always sharpening our skills in one-on-one communication with our givers? How do we engage them in meaningful ways? I think we need to pivot to that. Someone has said, in this environment, we're all startups now, and in one sense, that's kind of the case, and it's an opportunity for us. So I'm not seeing any radical departures at this point, but I think if we don't seize the opportunity to figure out how to do things better, a campaign would be an example. Maybe we can't ask for 5-year commitments to a campaign anymore. Maybe we need to shift to, maybe it's a 5-year or a 10-year vision, but let's do it in little chunks. What can we do first that will enable us to do the next part of that? That'll look different than some comprehensive campaigns look like today, and I think we're going to see more and more of that in the future.
Yeah. Kimberly or Britt, does anything to come to mind, or of your teams, or have you heard of people just doing kind of like greenlight whiteboard sessions saying, if the advancement world gets turned on its head, here's what we're going to think about?
I think that you can get rid of your $100 trinkets. I think going forward that the donors really want to make sure that you're putting all the money possible into the mission and the promise, and you can take that off the plate.
Britt, anything creative coming out of Gordon?
I think we're still in the midst of finding the pathway. I think we started at the top of the session saying, none of us have a playbook for how to walk through a pandemic, and it truly has had impact in terms of what our day-to-day looks like in such dramatic ways, both personally but also professionally. So I think we're still navigating that. We have this week, actually, the end of the week, we have one of our major gift officers doing their very first in-person visit since things have started. So I'll know more in a couple of days about how that looks. But it's, we're going to be meeting outside with masks on. So, I think it is just going to be different, and it will be some trial and error and figuring out what are people open to, what are they not open to. And I think, as Mark has said, we've done lots of really good things, but what is going to be where we focus so we are excellent and continue to move the mission forward for the kingdom.
Yeah, I think another thing we might have to put away besides the $100 trinkets is the $100,000 high scale weekends with givers. The optics of that just don't work in this environment. And it may come back, it may never come back, but a lot of people are rethinking that strategy right now.
Yeah, good word. I keep using the line, and I'm just going to use it again because I think it's so fitting for our time right now. It's timeless, but also perfect right now. And I'm stealing it from William Vanderbloemen, who said it a few weeks ago. But when the psalmist talks about thy word is a lamp unto my feet, oftentimes we want that to be like the Audi headlights giving us the mile down the road. And really the psalmist is talking about, it's a lamp, and it gives us that next step. And that's really all we have right now. And we're just going to keep taking, Britt, you were talking about, we're in the midst of it, and we're going to just keep trying to figure out what's the next step, and then faithfully pursue that, and then keep praying for wisdom that we've got the light for the next step. So those are good words. Kimberly, I want to toss one your way, and I want you to think down the road, and we could say a year from now. And after I just said that, I'm going to ask you to look down the road a year. I realize how silly that is. But what sort of leadership traits do you think are going to be in high demand in advancement work or philanthropy work? Or maybe I could ask it this way: what are you seeing right now as people rise to the top during this time that you think, wow, that's going to be clearly a needed leadership trait for this type of work leading into the future?
Sure, that's a great question. I'll mention 6 traits. I think they're evergreen, but I just want to hit on each one briefly. The first one is creative ways to be relational. I loved Britt's idea about the handwritten notes and continuing to think about ways to be relational. That's the name of the game, obviously, in development. 2, be dependable. Have a plan and execute it. One of the things that I was surprised when I moved to this side of the table as a donor, that it's not really about the sexy I want to know the numbers, that the plan is going to work, that there is a plan. I have a quote from the Wall Street Journal. It was an article called "Getting the Restart Right: How to Lead When Nobody Has a Map." This line struck me. In moments of radical uncertainty, nobody cares about your God-given eloquence or magnetism. Your leadership is a function of how you behave, and your behavior can be modified. So if you feel like you're not charismatic enough to lead during this time, I just want you to get your plan together and be dependable to execute it, and good fruit will come out of being dependable. Also, being discerning. A lot of you have a seat at the President's Cabinet table. There are cuts that you know in your heart you should have made a year or two ago, and nobody was willing to make those decisions. But if you're a leader, you have got to bring discernment to the table and make those hard cuts. As Mark started us off, we are going to have to make 20–25% cuts. The leadership lesson is where those cuts are made. Optimism. Good leaders absorb chaos and radiate hope. Have a very small group of friends to complain to, but never externally. But your mission is still the mission. Your mission is not to survive COVID. You each have amazing missions. Be optimistic and hopeful about that. Next, creativity. We talked a lot about design thinking. Design thinking applies to institutional advancement. So what can you prototype now? This is a great time to test ideas that there was never really a season to test them before. I do think some donors are okay with transparency and some of your ideas failing, as long as you talk to them about it. This isn't higher education, but talking to a donor, they gave a lot of money for motorcycles for evangelists to get around in India. And through bureaucracy, all of that money was taken, and it failed. But the donor did appreciate the transparency. I know there's very little margin in higher education, but a time to prototype. And I want to just end with confidence to remind you that this is a horizontal relationship between you and the donor or the foundation. Donors need you. They need this nonprofit. They desperately need recipients. And this is kingdom work that you're doing. And if you're raising money for people, you have a role in foundations and people of wealth giving to it. This is not a posture of too much, yes, humility, but I really want you to have a leadership trait of confidence in what you're doing as you approach these donors and foundations, because they cannot do their role in the kingdom without you, as you know. And so it's a really exciting time to have that relationship and partner together going forward.
I love that. Thank you. And I'm going to ask Britt and Mark if they have follow-up, but I'm going to twist it a little bit, because this is actually a question that just came in, because we're going to go to Q&A. And this is similar enough. I want to couch the follow-up this way. Somebody asked about advice you would give to a young professional entering into this work for the first time during a global pandemic. So what can they be focused on today that could help serve them down the road? And I think it's a similar enough question. I'll let you kind of tackle either part of that. Go ahead, Britt, if you have something.
I just want to echo what I heard Kimberly say to you, just in terms of that idea of partnership is so important in terms of the relational work. And I think, you know, as someone starting out in the field, this may be just an important piece to really recognize that dynamic, that it is the opportunity to present a chance for partnership between the institution and the donor to achieve something both parties want to achieve, which is to invest in the kingdom and make an impact for the kingdom. So I do think that that definition of partnership is really critical to exude that sense of confidence, that sense of purposefulness, is really, really a helpful way to understand it. When I first joined advancement work, that was one of the first pieces of learning that was so critical to feeling a level of comfort with the work, as well as a real sense of confidence about what I was doing and what I was bringing to the table as a part of the conversation and relationship with the giver.
Good.
If I was a young person today in advancement and looking forward to a career, there's two things I'd focus on. One is getting opportunities to learn how to ask in a winsome way, both in writing and face-to-face. Those kinds of leaders in advancement are rare. I can just tell you, they are rare. And if you're able to deliver that, you will serve institutions really well. Another thing I would say is be versatile. This is an all hands on deck kind of environment that we're in now. It's no time to say, I don't think that's in my job description. How can you pitch in and help get the overall job done? I think if you work in those two areas, you're going to bring a lot of value, both now and in the future.
Good. Another question came in, and maybe Britt, I'll let you take this one first since you're on a campus. And maybe this is part of the idea of the handwritten notes if you want to revisit that, but how can staff and faculty contribute to the overall advancement work during this time? I think that was my understanding, is you use some of those employees to do those notes. Anything else that you're seeing people jump in and take?
Yeah, so we're seeing, we have, because of the circumstance, we're on a campus, and when we don't have students on campus, we have some staff and some faculty who have some extra bandwidth. So we've been really intentional about redeploying staff in two to three main areas for us. One is this outreach to alumni and our donors, just to say, hey, we are so thankful for you, and how can we continue to be in relationship? How can we pray for you? That sort of thing. And then we've also deployed folks to help us with our enrollment. So really thinking about retention, as well as thinking about new student recruitment, which are major pieces in terms of our overall financial health as an institution. So we've been very intentional about asking the community to come alongside, and they've been so enthusiastic about this. And I think perhaps this season has allowed for that enthusiasm in new ways that we wouldn't have seen in any other climate. We saw that, I think, anecdotally as well with our Day of Giving. We didn't know whether we should even do a Day of Giving. We had some qualms about that. We're not a frontline service provider, but we just felt that the Spirit's nudge to say, no, keep going. Your community wants to know how they can help your students who are also on the front lines of experiencing this. So we pivoted our message. And I have to say, I was blown away by the faculty and staff response to that day. They wanted to be a part of ministering to our students, and they were already doing so much. They were pivoting how they were teaching. They were changing what their day-to-day looked like. I mean, they were already all in and giving so much, and yet they wanted to be able to give back in that way too. So I would say, don't underestimate how your entire campus community would want to be involved in helping your students and helping with advancement work. And I think there are it's ripe for creativity right now to involve many more people in the conversation.
Yeah. All those students that you typically have in the phone booths all night for their campus employment jobs, give those to staff and faculty, let them keep calling people. So Mark, are you seeing anything else across the landscape?
No, I don't think I have anything to add at this point.
Okay.
One learning about those calls that I just learned, and this is probably not new to Britt and Mark, but to just never in the advancement office use the word cold call. That language sets a tone. Always call it a check-in call, always call it a friendly call, but how you use that language with your team, your faculty maybe who are new to this project, sets the tone for maybe what that sounds like.
Yeah, I think coming alongside so we're really comfortable with language choices, things like that. So as you're enlisting new friends to this or across your campus, I think just providing some level of training. One of the things we did with the notes is we provided a template so that they don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can come alongside and provide really good tools. So, well, yeah, I would echo that from Kimberly as well.
Good. Hey, Brian, I'm going to
Yeah,
interrupt because I actually want to ask you to speak into this next question with your background.
Well, I can see it, and I was just going to give out Kimberly's cell phone number for that one. So.
Yeah. You and Kimberly, this is your passion. So we did, and this will be our last question before we wrap up today. Someone asked, what do you think this new financial crisis means for the future of institutional student life and student affairs programming? What's some advice you'd give to professionals in student life? Since this is your background, Brian, and then I know it's your background and passion, Kimberly, would love to hear you two speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, Kimberly, I'll give you a second to think. That's such a hard, I saw that come in and I thought, wow, and I saw it from anonymous, and if they want to reach out to me individually, I'd be happy to have a call. That's a tough one. I think this is rocking institutions, and I think institutions are going to look, especially those that rely heavily on residential education. It's going to rock the world, and so I think it's part of what we've been talking about. It's hard to see into the future of what it's going to mean, and as regulations come out of what residential housing can look like, of what dining facilities can look like. So student services, I think just based on what we can and cannot do will look different. I think, and I've had some of these conversations, if you go back into some of our webinars, I had one with Dr. Jeff Doyle, who's out of Baylor, about student support during this time and how they're pivoting to do really academic coaching and tutoring through online services. They had to this spring, but I think you'll see some of those differences, even long-standing. Mental health services, I think, are gonna look different, but I'm not sure what those are gonna look like just at this time. I think as we're seeing, people had to shift quickly. Well, I see this with our own kids, my own kids, with distance learning. We had to shift quickly to Zoom learning, but then, and it works, but I think people are saying, you know what, there's just this thing missing about in-person fleshiness, right, to education. And so I don't think we're going to lose that, but I think things will look differently. And the hard truth might be slimmer student life departments in the future. I'm just not sure what that looks like, what that makeup looks like at this point. Kimberly, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Maybe just two things. I'm a huge believer in Timely MD and a switch completely to telemedicine for that, and it's worked. And I think having a health services open from 9 to 4 every day probably is not going to work in the future if we do go back to campuses. And look, if you were doing your job right in student development this year, this pivot has been hard, but not as hard. But if you haven't built that relationship, it is truly hard to build that kind of relationship right now and to show care. And you're trying to show care, but all of those coffee meetings, as inefficient as they are, they're paying off now. But here we are in a crisis, but all that prior work hopefully is being cashed in now that will result in retention for fall of 2020.
Yeah. Nice little shout out to the Timely MD guys. I like those guys, and they're doing great work. So if you're not familiar with it, check out Timely MD for your campus. I'm just going to say my quick thanks, and then I know Holly's going to wrap up. But Mark, Kimberly, and Britt, thank you so much. This has been helpful to me. I hope it's been helpful to our listeners, and I'm just honored to be part of the conversation with you. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I echo that. Thank you so much for all of you for sharing your wisdom and insight and expertise with everyone joining us today. And thank you for joining us today, those of you that are listening or watching. I want to encourage you, first of all, I did put the link to our student development webinar that we just did a couple weeks ago. It was excellent. So if you're thinking through that as an organization or as an institution, we would encourage you to review that. It's in the Zoom webinar chat box. I also would encourage you to check out our 2 resources. They're really landing pages that are chocked full of resources as you lead in and through COVID-19. So that's schoolcovid19.com and reopeningschool.com. Our resources we're updating on a daily basis there, including information about the CARES Act PPP loan forgiveness that we just did a Facebook Live earlier today, as there's a lot of institutions that are navigating that right now. Also want to encourage you to check out Generis and Mark's team if you're thinking about capital campaigns or any advancement consulting. Mark and his team are the best at helping Christian institutions with that. And so we'd encourage you to talk with our friends at Generis on that. So thank you all again. If you have any follow-up questions or want to talk further, you can email me, holly@vanderbloemen.com, or Brian at bjensen@vanderbloemen.com. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.